In this video, I'll demonstrate 3 different ways which we can easily get data into Stata to create a Stata data set. The first way which we'll demonstrate how to do so is by simply typing in the data itself into Stata. To do so, we have to open up the data editor. So I move my cursor up to the button we see here. That is the data editor. Looks like an icon that is a spreadsheet with a pencil on top of it, which indicates that we can write into the data editor at this point. So with the cursor on top of that button, I will left mouse button click to open it up, and this is the data editor. You notice in the center of the screen here, the grid really represents or resembles a spreadsheet, and so we'll just enter the data directly here. Now what I've got is data for a few students, just 6 students I'll type in. I'll first of all type the name in the first cell, and once I enter in the name, I'll just hit return, and that automatically will bring me down to the cell below. And clearly what I have here in this first column is nothing more than the last name of the students. Now what I want to do is start typing in information related to sex, and that's going to be a numeric variable where 1 indicates that it's female and 2 indicates male. So I'll click in that first cell on the second row, type in 1, hit enter. And each time I hit enter, it goes down 1 more cell. Now go back up to the third column, click to highlight that, and I'll type in information for age. Now Bush did not indicate what age Bush is at, so we'll leave that as a period. And that's what Stata refers to for missing data. Let's now start to enter in information for 2 exams that were taken. Washington did not take the first exam, so we'll leave that as a period for missing data. And now I'll enter in information for the second exam into the last column here. Now with the data already entered in, I will just click on the close button to close the data editor window. Now you notice with each data point that I entered in and hit return, it executed either a generate or a replace value for each one of these cases. So now what I've done is I've entered the data in. Automatically what Stata does is it indicates the variable's name as var1, var2, all the way through to the last column, in this case the 5th column of var5. And what I want to do is to identify a name for each one of those variables that's more descriptive, so I know exactly what's contained in that first column. So I'll move the cursor down to the command window and click somewhere in that command window, left mouse button to highlight that. And what I'm going to do is take the first variable, which is var1, and I'm going to rename it. So the command is rename space, then enter in the existing variable name, which is var1 space, and then the new variable name, and I'll just type in name. I'll do that also for the next variable, rename. Now it's var2, and I will call that new variable sex. Then we'll see for rename, var3 will be the variable name age. Then rename, var4, and I will call that exam1, and rename var5, and I will call that exam2. So we now see that we've changed the names for each one of those variables, and it's reflected in the upper right hand screen where we see the window for variable information, name all the way down through exam 2. Now, one word about identifying names for variables in Stata. First of all, I would recommend that you keep your variable names to 8 characters or less. And the reason why I suggest that is sometimes in Stata printout, if you have a variable name that's too long, the printout will end up truncating what the variable name is, and it may be difficult then to discern one variable from another if you only see part of the name. Second, do not use special characters such as exclamation point, question marks, and so on. The only special character that you can use rather easily in Stata is the underscore. If you do use an underscore, do not put the underscore at the beginning of the variable name. Stata reserves variables with underscore in the very first column or the very first character for a variable name for Stata internal variables. And the last thing to keep in mind when you create a variable name is spaces are not counted within that variable name. So we don't have exam space 2. No, it's exam 2. If I wanted to have a gap between the M and 2 for exam, I would put exam underscore 2. So it must be one contiguous string of characters. Oh, and one last thing as it comes to my mind, Stata is sensitive to the case that you enter information in. So exam 2 with exam all in lower cases would be a different variable than capital E exam 2. Just a couple little things to keep in mind in terms of entering data. Now I can go up and display the data by looking at the data editor and browse button. You notice the data are there, and we see in the top of the columns the variable names that we've changed the variables to. And you'll notice that there's only one variable that's a character variable, or what Stata refers to as a string variable, and that's the very first one, name of Hamilton. And the fact that it's in red indicates then that Stata automatically discerned or could identify that that was character, or what it calls string information, and not numeric information. So let me go ahead and close that. Now to save this variable, this data set rather, what I find the easiest thing to do is use the drop-down menu under File. So come up under File, left mouse button to open up the menu. We'll come down to, and I'll just choose Save As. Now what it does, it brings you to, what I'm doing here is I'm working with a university server, and so it brings me to the part of the hard disk or the university server disk space, storage space, that's reserved for me. What I want to do is to save it on my own computer. In that case, I'll come down to Computer, scroll all the way down to the bottom here where I see Local Disk C:. That's my laptop that I have. I will open that up. It may take a moment since it's communicating between my laptop and the university server for access to my hard disk. I will permit all access. I want to read to and also read from. Now I've got to find where my files are stored that I use on a regular basis. I'll double click on Users, come up to find my username, D. Houston, and what I have right here in essence is my desk space. So I'll click now on My Documents, and this is probably where, if you have Stata stored or entered rather loaded on your own personal computer, this is probably where it's going to bring you up to initially when you go to Save As. I will just go into Stata Tutorials and I will just give it a dataset name and I'll call it Student and click Save. And what I've done there is simply then created this dataset and saved it in Stata. Now I find actually typing the data directly into the data editor in Stata to be a little bit cumbersome. Instead, I find that Microsoft Excel is a much easier platform within which I can enter the data. And so what I've done is I've created then an Excel file that contains the data. And what we'll do here is just very easily copy and paste the information from Excel into Stata. The first thing I need to do, I currently have one data set open. That's the one I created in the first part of this video, and that's named student.dta. I first of all need to clear this data out. Stata can really only handle one data set open at one time. So in the command window, I'll just type in the command clear, and now you notice there is no data set that is open. As we can see, there's no variables listed in the variable window up to the upper right hand part of the Stata screen here. To show you then what the data look like, this is the Excel file that I just given the name student, and it has the information that we see here with the data entered for each student in rows 2 through 7. And I also see here that in the very first row I have the variable name. And this is how you want to have your data set up if you do want to copy and paste information from Excel directly into Stata and not enter it directly in Stata yourself. One of the things I'll point out here, you notice for the variable age for Bush, there's a period for missing data. Bush did not report that information. But you also notice under exam 1 for Washington, there's a blank space. Washington had yet to take the exam by the time these grades were recorded. What we're going to do is just leave those cells as they are now. I'm going to click and drag to highlight the range of data, including the row that contains the variable names. I'm just going to come up under Home, and I will copy that information. Now I'll just minimize Excel, come back to the Stata window, and I'm going to go back up to the data editor, click on that button to open it up, and in the very first cell here I'm going to right mouse button click, come down and select paste with the left mouse button, and you notice it comes up and as asked me what do I want to do with the first row of information. It has detected that there's character information in that first row, and I want to treat that first row of information as the variable names. Click on that button, and right there are the data. Now you notice that for the variable age, Bush has a period for missing information. You also notice now a period is entered in for Washington under exam 1. It was a blank cell in Excel. So whether we represent missing data as with a period or a blank cell in the Excel file, Stata will read both of those as missing data, and that's what the periods indicate in Stata, is that this is missing information. Go ahead and close that data editor. Let's come back up, and now let's save this file. Notice I don't have to modify the variable names since they were contained within the Excel file itself. I'll click Save As, and it brings me right to the subdirectory where I most recently just saved the data set student. I'll call this data set 2. Oops. And just go ahead and hit Save. And now it's created a second data set with that same information. So a simple copy and paste from Excel works really well for most data sets. A third approach from getting data into Stata is to just import an Excel file directly. You notice I've cleared out the output window as well as the data set and also the previous commands that were executed in this session. I'll just come up under File, and I just did that just to give us a clean slate to start off with. I'll come down to Import, and I'll come over to Excel Spreadsheet, and now here's the Import Excel window. I want to click on Browse and find where the data set is stored, and wherever your data set is stored in your Excel file, you'll just browse through the various directories or subdirectories to get where the data are. Highlighted it, so therefore its name appears next to file name, and I'll click Open. You notice it indicates that the data are in sheet 1, cells A1 through A7. If I had multiple worksheets in this file with information on them, I could identify exactly which worksheet as well as which cell range here to grab the data from. One last thing I want to note is how it's treating the variable names that I had in the first row of the data set in Excel. And you notice the way it's treating it right now is the first row of information, name, sex, age, exam 1 and exam 2, is being treated as data. And it's going to name then those variables with the letters A through E for the last column. I instead want name, sex, age, exam 1 and exam 2 be treated as the labels for the variable names. So I'll come up here and click on import first row as variable names. And you notice now what we see happened is that the names are placed at the top. The name for the variables are placed at the top of each of those columns. So it will be treated now as variable names. Click OK. And now we notice that we have a data set with the variables name, sex, age, exam 1 and exam 2 entered in. Now it automatically created variable labels and just did nothing more but duplicate the variable name for the variable label. We in the future would want to go in and modify those labels to make them more descriptive. Let's go back up to the Browse button for the data editor. Left mouse button to open that up and to look at the data. And we do see that there are 6 cases. We see that the name, Hamilton, Clinton, all the way through to Hoover, is entered in red. It's a string variable. But we notice that the variable age is also in red. And that red color indicates that Stata is treating it as character information, or what Stata refers to as a string variable, not numeric. So we could not perform any statistical analysis on the variable age as it currently is entered into the data set. You'll see that sex, exam 1 and exam 2, all 3 are black. And in that case, it is treating those variables, as though they are numeric information appropriately. Probably what has happened here under the variable age, recall that we had Bush for age had a period for missing data. Well, Stata is treating that as a non-numeric piece of information, so it's not treating it necessarily just as missing data. Instead, it's treating it as character data, so all the information must be character in that particular column. Now, when we had for exam 1 for Washington a blank space, Stata saw, oh, that's missing data, I'll put a period in for that. But putting a period in for missing data in Excel, Stata views that as character information. And another way, other than looking at the red color of the information under the column age, to tell that it is string or character information, if we click on the age variable, then we notice then that label, if we go down below, we see that type is string or str2. That refers to a string variable. So we wouldn't be able to compute any sort of descriptive statistics for this variable age. Let me go ahead and close up the Browse window there. And to demonstrate for you here that we cannot compute descriptive statistics, for instance, for the variable age, I'll just type in summarize age, and what's returned is 0 observations. And that 0 indicates that there are 0 cases with valid numeric data that I can compute the information of mean, standard deviation, and so on for. So we're going to have to take that information and transform it into a numeric variable. Now, the way in which we'll do that is we'll use the command dstring. So I'll type in dstring space, indicate the variable that I wish to convert from string to numeric, and that's the variable age, comma, and now I'll type in replace. I'll just replace this variable right on top of the variable age and hit enter. Now, to make sure that it has worked, if we notice, what we can do is click on the variable age, and what we had is str2 for variable type. Now we have byte for type, and that is one indication that it is now numeric information. What we can also do is open up the data editor browse window, and we notice now age is in black, which indicates that it's being treated as numeric variable. I'll go ahead and close that. And lastly, we can also then just perform some basic statistical analysis with that variable. Let's summarize, get descriptive stats for the variable age. And what we have now we have information for mean, standard deviation, and so on, which does indicate that the variable is now being treated as numeric as we would like it to be. I'll come up under File, choose Save As. It's going to take me right to where I've been working in this session, and I'll just call it Student 3. Click Save. And now I've created a third version of the same data set, but this time I imported the information directly from Excel. Now if we're done with our session, we can simply come up to File and come down to Exit to end our session.